Why the NIU RQi, this A1 electric motorcycle, brought me both joy and concern. You'll find out in this video. Stick around! NIU RQi, 6 letters scrambled together. That's what it might look like at first glance. In reality, this bike was actually introduced last year and has now made it to market. And this is the first time we've managed to get our hands on it. Let me give you a quick rundown so we know what we're talking about. Yes, you heard it right in the intro. This is an A1 class motorcycle, and that's exactly where I want to start. When it comes to dimensions, for someone like me who stands at 1.87 meters, it's definitely closer to a 500 than a 125 in terms of size. In terms of performance, it delivers a maximum output of 7.5 kilowatts, that's about 10 horsepower, and a nominal output of 5 kilowatts. So it doesn't even push the upper limit of the A1 class, yet it still outperforms many other A1 bikes. And that's despite carrying a weight of 186.5 kilograms. We actually weighed it ourselves on a livestock scale. Of course, the variation isn't all that exciting because, as I've now learned, fully charged batteries are slightly heavier than empty ones, but obviously you don't have fill levels like you do with combustion engines. Let's address the elephant in the room. How far can you actually get on this thing? Well, NIU claims 105 kilometers. In our test, we spent a lot of time at full throttle, riding it the same way we would any standard test bike. And to tell you straight, within the first 10 kilometers, I'd already burned through over 20% of the battery. So if you ride it hard, the range is cut in half, simple as that. Under mixed use conditions, I'd say 70 kilometers is a realistic estimate, but it's worth noting that when you get down to the final 15% of battery capacity, the system regulates the output, so the top speed is limited to just 45 kilometers per hour. I already mentioned batteries, and yes, they're removable. And that puts the NIU in a league of its own. I honestly can't think of another A1 class bike that has removable batteries which can be charged via a standard household socket. There are 2 serious units inside, 2 times 23 kilograms each, so lifting them out doubles as a decent arm workout. You can charge them inside the bike or take them out and charge them separately. Since I've already said charging about a dozen times, how long does it actually take? Well, there's a fast charger included, but even with that, and charging both batteries internally, which is quicker than doing them back to back, NIU officially claims 7 hours from 0 to 100%. We managed it in 5.5 hours, starting at 16%, so 6.5 to 7 hours is probably about right. But faster than that, not happening. And no, there's no support for rapid charging stations like the ones you find in public spaces. No CCS2 connectors here, just your regular Schuko socket at home. So, now that we've covered range and charging time, let's move on to riding. These are the 2 questions we always get asked beforehand, usually via YouTube or Instagram. What do people want to know about the bikes? Let's talk a bit about what it's like to actually ride the NIU. Important to know, there are 2 riding modes, dynamic and sport. If there's only one battery installed, you can only ride in dynamic mode, which is the lower powered option. In that case, the NIU tops out at around 70 to 75 kilometers per hour. In sport mode, NIU lists a top speed of 110 kilometers per hour. I managed to squeeze out 100 on a pretty long straight, but the battery was already down to 60%. So for lighter riders, and just so you know, I'm well into triple digits in terms of weight, you'll probably get there quicker, and if you tuck in, you might even squeeze out a bit more. And there's a button for boost located on the right-hand side, just under the front brake lever. When stationary, you can press it to activate a kind of launch control, hold the brake, open the throttle fully and let go. It accelerates from 0 to 50 kilometers per hour in 2.9 seconds. That's significantly quicker than most A1 bikes, I'd say. That same button also activates an overdrive mode, which pushes the top speed a bit higher. Here's something a bit odd. I told you earlier that the max power output is 7.5 kilowatts. The display shows speed on the left, battery level and range at the bottom, and on the right-hand side it shows power output. But on the right-hand side, the display sometimes shows 9.9 kilowatts of power being used. I don't really know how that adds up. Maybe one of you out there can explain. As far as electronics go, it's pretty well equipped. It's got traction control and ABS, both of which can be turned off, but only through the app, not via the display. There's also a USB port in the display, so charging your phone is no problem. It also comes with cruise control, something easy to implement in electric bikes, and it works perfectly here, starting from as low as 30 kilometers per hour. A quirky detail about cruise control, it doesn't deactivate when you pull the front brake. Yes, you heard that right. I think that's a real safety issue. If you pull the rear brake, cruise control switches off immediately. All good there. But the front brake, the bike keeps accelerating. That's not ideal and definitely takes getting used to. Still, it's a handy feature in practice. There's also a creeping mode. If you hold the cruise control button down, the bike will roll forward or backward slowly. Great for tight parking situations or for shorter riders. Personally, I didn't really need it. Here's a point that often bothers me with electric bikes, and the RQi is no exception. There's no way to secure the bike when parked. What do I mean? On a petrol bike, you can leave it in gear and it won't roll. The RQi, no such luck. No mechanical brake connected to the side stand, like on some BMWs. You just have to make sure it's parked on flat ground or it will roll away. Let's quickly talk about ergonomics and build quality. I mentioned earlier that I'm 1.87 m and I fit on it just fine. The seat height is 820 millimeters, very comfortable. The seat itself is narrow, but because the two massive battery packs sit where the tank would normally be, well, a fake tank in this case, the knee grip is a bit off. You kind of sit on it like a chopper and you can't really bring your knees together. It feels a bit awkward when riding, and I also have to say that the seat isn't particularly comfortable over longer distances. But for the short range you get per battery charge, it's fine. One thing in its favor, there's plenty of space for a passenger. Proper grab handles too. Our mate Howie hopped on the back and said he'd manage, just not with me riding apparently. What he meant by that, I've no idea. Anyway, I mentioned earlier that the NIU talks to you. That depends on whether you've installed the app, and I have to say, if you're interested in this bike, you'll definitely want the app because most of its features depend on it. You can start the bike using the app. It connects via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. As soon as you're nearby, no key needed. This is what the key looks like. Basically just for show, everything's done through the app now. You can check battery status remotely, see your ride history, top speed, the route taken, and so on. All that data is only available in the app, not on the bike's display. And that's why the display keeps turning on and off. I hope it's not too distracting. But once you're inside the app ecosystem, you're giving up quite a bit of data. In return, though, you get a lot of functionality. The bike sends an alert if it's moved without permission. All the features you'd normally add with a GPS tracker like Monimoto are already built in. And honestly, for an A1 class bike, this level of equipment is almost unheard of. I've already spent ages talking about what it can do. So what's it like to ride? First impressions: Brembo brakes, Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3 tires, sporty setup, 140 at the back, 110 at the front, makes for a nimble ride. The suspension, not adjustable. Well, technically the rear shock is adjustable, but you'd need a hook wrench, and the adjustment point is tucked under the seat where you can't reach it. So yes, adjustable in theory, but not in practice. Ride quality? That's where it falls short. As much as it beats most 125s on motor performance, the suspension is a letdown. The fork feels wooden at best. The rear shock transmits a fair few bumps. This is clearly where they try to save money, and it shows. The braking setup is decent, works well for this kind of bike, and it's good to see the brake levers are adjustable. Just a reminder, no clutch here, so both levers up top are brakes. And no foot levers either, just foot pegs. That's weird at first. If you're used to braking with your foot mid-corner, you'll just be pressing air, but you get used to it. NIU claims the bike has regenerative braking when you roll off the throttle. Honestly, I didn't notice anything. No stats either. On the scooters, Howie did a video on one, I'll link it below. There is an indicator showing regen levels. Not the case here. Right, let's wrap this up with a conclusion. Who's the NIU for and who isn't it for? Let me start with a quick story. We were out on our usual test route. Our cameraman Shaf was on a Kawasaki W230, pretty much the polar opposite of the RQi, and I was on the NIU. I said to him, let me try that. It's got, 18 horsepower, about 230 cc, double what you'd get in an A1 bike. I needed to know whether it was just my perception or if the NIU could actually keep up. And it turns out in the saddle, everything feels slower. Without engine noise and vibrations, you just have less of that visceral motorcycle feeling. More time to enjoy the scenery, sure, but speeds don't feel the same and you don't have much to do. But in actual fact, I clocked our performance at several spots along the route. And I was going the same speed, maybe even a bit slower, on the W230 as on the NIU. Despite being A1 compliant, the NIU really does hold its own. Performance comes quietly, but it's there. Especially when it comes to acceleration, it's better than most 125 bikes. I'm also curious how it'll do on the supermoto tracks, and Nils is taking it there. I reckon it'll do pretty well even with the extra weight, so who should buy it? If your daily commute is more than 25 kilometers one way, and you don't have a place to charge the battery or don't want to lug 23 kilos around, you'll want to think twice. Because if you ride an A1 bike, you'll likely push it to its limits. And that includes electrics too. If you do, your range is around 50 kilometers. So that's 25 out and 25 back. Anything more and you're out of luck. Even for an evening spin, it might be too limited. Depends how far you've got to go. And once you hit 100 kilometers per hour, which it easily can, like any electric, the battery drains fast. So unless your fun starts right at your doorstep, this might not be for you. But if you're looking for a city runabout that's quiet, emissions-free and removable battery equipped in the A1 class, then this is your only real choice right now. Tech lovers will also appreciate it. Over-the-air updates, for example. Ours came with an older firmware version. I saw in the app that you could disable ABS and traction control, downloaded the update, and bang, a minute later I could use those features. Speaking of which, NIU includes the app features free for the first 3 years. From year 4 onwards, it's 50 euros annually to keep using all the connectivity. One final legal point, you can disable ABS and traction control via the app, but it's not shown on the display. Legally, traction control doesn't need to be shown, but ABS does. And even though the bike has an ABS light, it doesn't stay on when it's disabled, meaning you might think you've got ABS when you don't. And one last cool feature, if you want to share the bike, you can register up to 5 users via the app. They can all connect with their own phones. And if you're not sure who rode last, the bike has dash cams, front and rear. Probably overkill here, but in countries like Russia where there's no insurance mandate, it's a lifesaver. All footage is backed up to the cloud. So there are pros and cons, just like the NIU itself. Hopefully this gave you a good overview of what this bike can do and who it's for. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. I definitely recommend a test ride. At 7,490 euros, I think the price is fair for what's on offer. Sure, now that Austria's scrapped e-mobility incentives, you've got to pay the full price. And some people might say that's too much for a 125. But if you look at the competition, BMW and so on, their electrics start at 10 grand. So you're actually getting a lot of electric motorcycle for relatively little money. All right, I'll wrap it up there. Take care. See you later.